I saw a floating head. It was late at night, and I was putting beef in the slow cooker because I wanted it done for the morning. I reached up the shelves to grab some seasoning and heard creaking. I thought it was my kids. "You should go to sleep now," I said a bit loudly so they could hear me from upstairs. The creaking continued, which annoyed me. Then I saw something out of my peripheral vision, and there was nobody but a head of a bald, pale man. It was floating 5 feet off the ground in the middle of our living room. Its face kept looking as if it was sad, or like it was begging. It then locked eyes with me without changing its sad expression and opened its mouth. I froze. I had a darker wall there, only with a coat rack with my husband's work jackets, so it stood out like a sore thumb. I looked away, thinking it was my imagination, but when I looked back, the head was still there, floating and looking at me. So I ran out the back door because I'd have to pass it to get upstairs with my husband and kids. I ended up calling him on my phone to come walk me in. I was wide awake, not sleepy, not out of it, on no medication. I have no reason to see that ever. My husband reassured me there was no one else inside the house. After a few hours of calming down, I fell asleep. The next morning, my husband told me he had seen the exact same thing a few months back. Fortunately, we never saw the floating head again. My mother's friend called her and was slightly hysterical that her house was haunted. My mom is a scientist and was very skeptical, but agreed to come check it out. The friend was adamant that either the house was haunted or she was going crazy, and in either case, she needed help. My mom arrives at the friend's house, and she begins showing my mom what she's seen. First, in the living room, there is a brass lamp that is shiny, so you can see the reflection of the kitchen behind as you look at the lamp. She asks my mum to just watch the reflection in the lamp. My mother sees a shadowy man step out from behind the wall. She turns around. There's no one there. This phenomenon repeats itself several times. Next, they go into the friend's son's room. They turn off the lights and close the door, but leave the hallway light on. As she's looking at the strip of light under the door, very clearly she sees the shadow of 2 feet step in front of the door. They went out to check, and there was no one there. Again, this phenomenon repeats itself several times. Lastly, they check the bed. She fluffs up the comforter, and then, very clearly, you could see the indentation of someone sitting on top of the comforter. Fluff up the comforter again, and it happens again. All of these events would repeat themselves whenever she looked at them. My mom insists that she really tried to investigate all of these events, but could find no other explanation. The friend then went to a spirit medium soon after, who told her it was her furniture that was haunted, and not the house. It turned out that the furniture was second-hand and bought at a garage sale, so she got rid of the furniture, and the paranormal stuff stopped. I used to sell HVAC in Michigan during college. There was this really awesome old dude who called for a new high-efficiency furnace in his historic home in Depot Town near Ann Arbor. As I'm putting together the quote, we get to talking about the home and its history. He tells me that it was part of the Underground Railroad and had a tunnel that led down to the train station only about 500 yards away. I'll be honest, I was more focused on the sale than all the details he was laying out about the house. But one thing that made my ears perk up was when he mentioned there are unseen people living with him. He tells me about a few, but the one that stuck was a lady so fascinated with electricity that she would turn random lights on at random times. Sometimes at night, he said he'd hear footsteps on his stairs and the light switch flicking on and off. As I print out the quote and go over the payment options with him, the light behind me turns on, then the one across the room, then the one in the kitchen, then the one in the hallway. I just kind of got quiet, sank a little in my seat, and stared at him with wide eyes. Then the old dude raised his voice and said something like, "Okay, that's enough for today, sweetheart. We can do it again tomorrow." And it stopped. I didn't know if the old dude was just having some fun with me or it was real. I closed the sale, and the install team said there was nothing wonky or faulty with the house's electrical system. A patient had passed away during my shift. She was a well-known old lady, and everyone on the ward liked her. At handover that evening, I mentioned the patient had passed away. The door to the handover room, which I had closed, opened wide quickly and shut gently by itself just after I mentioned she had passed away. I believe it was her saying goodbye. One night later that month, we were chatting about the said patient at the nurse's station. Weirdly, a card that was pinned on a notice board fell just as we started talking about her. I went to pick it up. It was a card from the patient's family saying thanks for taking care of their mum. I thought it was quite nice. I know it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but it's 100% what happened to me more than 20 years ago. When I was still relatively newly married, my then husband and I moved into a townhouse-style apartment. The 2 floors of our apartment were on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the building, and the management office and mailbox area was almost directly below us on the ground level. This will be important for later. The woman who managed the building was older, didn't care for the property well, and usually spent most days chain-smoking Camel non-filters in her office. She was also a hateful old racist. Let's call her Juno. She really resented that we had the townhouse, claiming we lied about my being pregnant when we moved in because she didn't want to rent that unit to people with kids. She also made a few disparaging remarks about my husband due to his race. So after our baby was born, I was a stay-at-home mom, just busy keeping the house clean and the baby occupied. I had no car or local mom friends. After lunch, the kiddo needed a bath, so I went upstairs and ran the tub. Soon, I had the baby sitting happily splashing in one of those suction cup bath seats. Important to note, it's the middle of winter and we had no heat. It's an issue I'd been fighting Juno the landlord for a while, among other maintenance issues, like my arcing ceiling fan or the garbage disposal that was held on with duct tape and leaked. We basically had to keep a space heater or 2 in every room to keep the chill off. I had taken one of the space heaters in the bathroom to keep it warm enough for bath time and had it sitting out of reach and splashing distance on top of the bathroom counter. I was standing in the bathtub, getting ready to lift the baby out, when all of a sudden the space heater started to rock back and forth when it had not been rocking before. I had this horrible feeling of dread as I looked at the heater, and I just reacted because I knew I couldn't get both of us out of the tub in time. I reached down to grab the baby seat, ending up pulling it up off the tub and dropping the baby over the side of the tub to the bathroom floor just as the heater got to the end of the cord. It thumped into the shower door, bounced off the edge of the tub, and landed on its side on the floor a couple of inches away. When I looked over to the corner of the bathroom, that part of the room seemed to just get darker, like it was filling up with shadows. There was no smoke, no change in lighting, no windows, and no clouds hiding the sun. It was just darker. I also started to smell cigarette smoke, Camel non-filters, which I knew the smell of well from being in Juno's office all the time to get things fixed. The smell was so thick it made me cough and my chest ached, but I couldn't see any smoke haze. And I felt this overwhelming sensation of hatred and malice, like someone was standing there giving me a death glare. I grabbed the baby in a towel and ran downstairs. I was so freaked out, and I couldn't bring myself to go back up there, so I used some diapers from the diaper bag and kept the baby wrapped in the towel and cuddled up to stay warm. I stayed down there the entire rest of the day until my husband got home. Every so often, I'd look up the stairs at the bathroom, but I didn't want to take the baby up there, and I was afraid to leave him alone downstairs. When he asked me why the baby wasn't dressed, I told him about the heater and the smoke in the bathroom, and he went up to check, figuring it was yet another maintenance issue. There were no electrical issues, no damage to the outlet, no smoke, no cigarette smell. He put the heater back on the counter and turned it on, watched it for a few minutes, and it didn't rock. It's stable, so it didn't rock itself off the counter earlier. He laughed it off, but later that day, we heard Juno's adult son downstairs near the mailboxes yelling his head off at people, and that's when we found out she'd had a massive heart attack in her office earlier that day. He'd found her dead in her chair, with a Camel non-filtered still in her hand.